Here is the contradiction at the center of this story. In February 2026, Victoria Woods went public with a specific claim. Her sister GloRilla, one of the most commercially successful artists to come out of Memphis in years, had left her family behind.
Because basically you saying she ain't got no money, so she ain't trying to give us nothing. You justifying her. I don't give a...
No calls, no money, no acknowledgement of where they came from or what they survived to get there. That claim moved fast because the underlying story, shared poverty, 10 kids, one person exits, the rest stay behind, is immediately legible. But Victoria's claim runs directly into a document from 2015, an arrest warrant, Memphis Police Department. The person named as the victim in that record is Gloria Woods, GloRilla. She was 15, Victoria was 19.
So when I text her and it went green, I'm like, okay, the moment told your number.
That document does not answer the money question. It does not tell us who is right about what got paid or what got promised.
People be thinking we have more money than we have. Every artist who got 50 million ain't got 50 million. Every artist you think got 100 million ain't got 100 million.
What it does is change the first question entirely. Before we audit a single financial claim, before we get to the $500,000 figure, the $2,500 ask, or the payment that came from the last place anyone expected, we need to establish what kind of narrators we are dealing with on each side, not to assign blame, to read the record correctly. Let's map this. A quick note on how we sort evidence before we go any further. Documents rank above screenshots. Screenshots rank above verbal testimony. Verbal testimony from interested parties ranks above single source claims. When competing receipts collide in this story, that hierarchy is what decides which one holds. According to the Memphis Police Department arrest warrant, Victoria was taken into custody at a Memphis hotel following a domestic altercation.
What y'all think about Boots? I don't care about his fan base. I don't care about none of that. This on Tubi movie.
The record documents that she allegedly threatened to discharge a firearm and subsequently admitted to officers that a weapon had been placed outside the room to avoid discovery.
I mean, well, growing up, it was a struggle. I didn't start living life till I got to adulthood.
That is an official record of a formally alleged incident, not a rumor, not a counterclaim from GloRilla's team, and not the same as a conviction. A warrant shows police processed an allegation. It is not a court finding of guilt, but it is the most institutionally grounded artifact in this story. Filed documentation, documented police action, and Victoria's own admission about the weapon's location on the record, the kind of source you can cite. Now here is why that matters before we go anywhere else. Victoria spent weeks positioning herself as the protective older sibling, the one who suffered alongside her sister, who held the family together through poverty, who deserved to be acknowledged when the money finally came. That framing carries real weight. The childhood she describes is on the public record. Fraser, 10 kids, chronic food insecurity. Getting McDonald's was, by Victoria's own account, an occasion, not a meal, an event. That context is real. But here is the decision point the public narrative largely skipped. When one person in a family has a documented history of threatening another family member with a firearm, and that family member was a minor at the time, the question of why did GloRilla cut contact changes significantly. It stops being a question about celebrity arrogance or money-driven distance. It becomes a question about personal safety and legal liability. GloRilla's camp did not need to make that 2015 record the center of their public response. The record exists. When it resurfaced during this dispute, it landed as its own evidence, requiring no interpretation. So before we get to the financial claims, we hold two things at once. Victoria says she is a wronged family member speaking truth to a celebrity who forgot where she came from. The record from GloRilla's camp says Victoria is a narrator with a documented pattern of behavior that explains and legally justifies the distance. Both positions are on the record. Only the evidence gets to move the dial. Here is what we know, what is claimed, and what remains unclear. The dispute entered the public sphere around February 4th and 5th, 2026. But the story does not start there. It starts in 2022. The moment the financial math in this family permanently changed. GloRilla's debut single broke through that summer. She went from a shared floor in Fraser to a Grammy nomination within roughly 4 years. That is not a slow climb. That is the kind of gap that opens between family members almost overnight, and it is the engine behind every dispute like this one. When one person exits poverty at a speed the rest of the family cannot follow, the support expectations that sustained everyone during the hard years do not scale with the new reality. They collide with it. That collision is what went public in February 2026. Victoria said she texted GloRilla congratulations when the single popped. She said the text went green. The number had changed. From that point forward, according to Victoria's account, the family was cut off. New number, New World. When Victoria asked her mother for the updated contact, she says she was told she would need GloRilla's permission first. We cannot independently verify that exchange. There is no screenshot of the green text on record. There is no on-record statement from the mother about that specific moment. What we have is Victoria's account, presented across multiple interviews, TMZ in early February 2026, and a longer sit-down with DJU-TV. And one important piece of context. The estrangement between the two sisters appears to predate GloRilla's fame. If that is accurate, then the framing of "she left us when the money came" may be missing a significant portion of the timeline. Here is the record as it stood when February 2026 went public. Victoria appeared on TMZ Live on February 5, 2026. Her central claims were three. GloRilla had provided no financial support to the family. Their mother was still actively employed in a manual labor role at FedEx, and all Victoria was asking for was $2,500 per sibling, a number she framed as negligible relative to GloRilla's estimated earnings. Those three claims became the baseline of a week-long public dispute that eventually pulled in Boozy Badazz, Finesse 2 Times, Freddie Gibbs, and, most unexpectedly, an incarcerated rapper who sent Victoria the exact $2,500 she had been asking her sister to send. We will get to all of that, but right now, the most important thing to understand is this: when Victoria named figures, named a workplace, and named a dollar amount on camera, she set a specific evidentiary standard. Those specifics created a testable record, and within days, GloRilla's camp began testing it. Let's lay out the sequence clearly, because the order in which things happened is part of the story. February 4th, 2026. Victoria begins posting publicly Facebook live streams, accusing GloRilla of abandoning the family. The framing is emotional, it is personal, and it moves fast because the underlying story lands immediately with a large audience. February 5th, 2026. Victoria sits down with TMZ Live. This is the moment the dispute crosses from social media grievance into documented public record. She states on camera that all she wanted was $2,500 per sibling. She states their mother is still working a daily manual labor job at FedEx. She describes a family that has received nothing meaningful from GloRilla since the money came. Status check. Victoria has the volume. GloRilla still has the silence. February 6th, 2026. Victoria posts a screenshot of an Apple Pay transaction. She received $2,500. The sender, per her public disclosure, was Tory Lanez, the incarcerated rapper currently serving time following a firearms offense involving Megan Thee Stallion, one of GloRilla's professional collaborators. Victoria publicly thanked him. We will come back to that payment. The incentive structure behind it is more interesting than the dollar amount. February 9th, 2026. Two things happen simultaneously, and they pull in opposite directions. First, Boozy Badazz appears on The Breakfast Club. He discusses the financial pressure artists face when family members expect a share of earnings, using his own situation as an example. He states multiple times he is not taking sides in any specific dispute. Victoria heard something different. She responded publicly, questioning his standing to comment and referencing his public record on other matters. Boozy responded on X, called himself her diabetic twin, a reference to a shared health condition both have disclosed publicly, offered an informal apology, and said he was speaking from personal experience, not targeting her. The exchange de-escalated on his end. Victoria kept going. Second, also on February 9th, GloRilla's parents and supporting siblings hosted an Instagram live session. This is where the counter receipts entered the record. During that stream, GloRilla's siblings stated, on camera by name, that GloRilla had provided $500,000 in financial support to their mother, that she purchased a residential property for the family, and that she purchased a vehicle for their father. They described a pattern of periodic direct payments to family members who, in their framing, had stayed solid. Here is where we have to be precise about what that evidence actually is. The people speaking on that live stream have a direct stake in GloRilla's narrative. That does not make them wrong. It means they are interested witnesses. The people saying this have skin in the game. Their account cannot be treated as confirmed until there is a document that does not come from inside the room. The research conducted for this audit found no independently verified property deed transfer in Shelby County public records, no certified financial disclosure, no statement from GloRilla's management confirming the $500,000 figure. What exists is on-record verbal testimony from family members publicly aligned with GloRilla's position. That distinction matters, and there is one more thing worth noting about the $500,000 figure specifically. By naming a number that large, the siblings did something beyond defending GloRilla. They made Victoria's $2,500 request look like attention-seeking rather than a survival need, regardless of whether the $500,000 is verified. That is the framing function of the number, separate from whether it is accurate. What we can confirm, GloRilla posted Instagram story screenshots around February 9th showing a text message thread with a contact her camp identified as their mother. In those messages, the mother expresses gratitude for what GloRilla has provided, describing her as a blessing and acknowledging significant support. Those screenshots are a verifiable digital artifact. They exist. They are on record. What they confirm, the mother's on-record sentiment directly contradicts Victoria's claim that GloRilla had provided nothing. What they do not confirm, the specific dollar figure. Those are two separate things, and the audit holds them separately. So now we have two competing receipts. Victoria's receipt, a TMZ broadcast in which she states on camera that the family has been financially abandoned. GloRilla's receipt, screenshots of the mother's own text messages expressing the opposite. One of those cannot be the full picture. Possibly neither is. Then came the FedEx question. And this is where the dispute gets structurally interesting. Victoria stated publicly that their mother was still punching a clock at FedEx every day. The implication was clear. GloRilla has not retired her mother. The internet ran with that as evidence of neglect. Here is what the counter record says. A disclosed workplace address, once it goes viral, becomes a liability. Fans, media, and online traffic get directed to that location. An employer then has to weigh the safety of their facility. GloRilla's siblings said on the February 9th live stream that the mother's departure from FedEx was not proof of neglect being corrected. It was an unintended consequence of Victoria going public in the first place. We cannot resolve this one. There is no FedEx employment record, no resignation paperwork, and no independent statement from the mother on this specific point. Victoria says it is evidence of abandonment. The siblings say Victoria's own actions forced the exit. Flag it as contested, and move. It is not a pillar of the case either way. Now look at what GloRilla did not do. Because in brand management, absence of action is a data point. She did not go on live. She did not respond directly to Victoria's claims in a public statement. She did not grant an interview addressing the family dispute. What she did, posted the text message screenshots, reposted content related to self-sufficiency, and, most pointedly, publicly reposted job listings from a public employment platform. She maintained her professional schedule. Grammy season commitments continued without public interruption. That is a recognizable posture. Every day, GloRilla stayed off live, and on her schedule was a day the dispute looked more like Victoria's story than a shared one. The receipt spread wider than the original TMZ framing. Whether that was strategy or instinct, the frame held. The job listings repost was the one moment closest to direct commentary. It was pointed. It landed as a message without being a statement. Her camp maintained plausible distance while the audience read the subtext clearly. Whether that reads as strategic or cold depends on where you are standing. In terms of measurable brand outcome, which we will cover in the incentives section, the silence held. February 10th, 2026. Victoria's primary Facebook page was deactivated. Per Victoria's own account, the page was reported en masse following a public signal from GloRilla's fanbase. The page going down wiped out the content she had built and the monetization she had been generating from the dispute's viral traction. Here is what we can and cannot say about that. What is verifiable? The page came down. The timing aligned with GloRilla's camp's most active countermove period. What is not verifiable? The specific mechanism. There is no platform transparency report confirming how the removal was triggered. No meta public statement. What we know is that mass reporting can accelerate a platform's policy review process, and policy review can result in removal. Whether the page was removed because of targeted reporting or because the reporting surfaced existing policy violations. That is a question the platform itself has not answered publicly. The audit holds that open. What is measurable? Victoria lost her primary distribution channel at the peak of the dispute's audience. GloRilla's fanbase functioned here not as a passive audience, but as an active participant in the outcome. Protecting the artist meant protecting their own investment in her identity. That is a stakeholder dynamic worth naming, not just a footnote. Here is where the ledger stood by February 10th. Victoria's side of the record, TMZ broadcast on camera, DJU TV, sit down on camera, multiple live stream sessions, Apple Pay screenshot showing $2,500 received from Tory Lanez. GloRilla's side of the record, mother's text message screenshots, 2015 arrest warrant back in public circulation, siblings on camera testimony, professional schedule maintained without disruption. And now, Victoria's primary platform, gone. The dispute had escalated from a family grievance to a documented receipts exchange, and one side had just lost its megaphone. Let's go back to the pivot point, because everything in this dispute, who gets believed, whose account holds weight, why GloRilla's silence was enough, runs through one document, the May 2015 arrest warrant. According to that record, Victoria Woods was taken into custody at a Memphis hotel following a domestic incident involving her then 15-year-old sister, GloRilla Woods. The warrant documents that Victoria allegedly threatened to discharge a firearm during the confrontation and subsequently admitted to officers that a weapon had been placed outside the room prior to their arrival to avoid discovery. She was 19 at the time. To be precise about what that document is and is not, it is an official record that the incident was formally alleged and processed. It documents police action and Victoria's own admission regarding the weapon's location. It is not a conviction. What it is, and this matters, is an institutional record that does not come from GloRilla's camp, does not come from a leak, and does not require anyone's interpretation to land. It resurfaced during this dispute as standing evidence, not new information, newly relevant. Victoria addressed it directly during her DJU-TV interview. She denied it. Her siblings, the ones who appeared on the February 9th live stream, backed the record. They stated that the 2015 incident is the foundational reason GloRilla has maintained distance from Victoria specifically, as distinct from the broader family. They also offered additional context, that Victoria's placement in foster care resulted from her own conduct, and that when Child Protective Services investigated, the other siblings did not corroborate Victoria's account of conditions in the home, which led to the case being closed. Victoria's version of that same sequence is different. She says her siblings outnumbered her and chose not to back her up, leaving her without support when she needed it most. Both accounts exist on the record. Foster care agency records are typically sealed. We cannot independently verify either version through that documentation. What we can say, the siblings' account aligns with the 2015 arrest warrant in characterizing Victoria as a source of instability within the family unit. The foster care claim exists. It is attributed to sibling testimony, and it sits in sealed record territory. Note it, flag it, move on. It supports the broader credibility picture without needing its own segment. Here is the core credibility tension in this audit, not whether GloRilla gave money, not whether the mother still works at FedEx. The core tension is this: which account of this family's internal history is closer to the record? And how much does that history explain the present? Here is what the incentive logic says. If the 2015 incident happened as documented, and the arrest warrant is the most institutionally grounded account of that specific event, then GloRilla changing her number after achieving fame is not arrogance. It is a safety decision made by someone with a documented reason to be cautious. Victoria's green text, which she framed as a symbol of celebrity abandonment, reads differently when you place the 2015 record underneath it. Contact boundaries can be safety policy, not money policy. That reframing is not GloRilla's camp making an argument. It is the record doing the work on its own. Now let's be equally rigorous about what the record does not settle. The 2015 warrant documents a threat and an admission. It does not, by itself, determine what GloRilla's current financial obligations to her family are. A sibling with a difficult history is not automatically owed nothing. The existence of a prior incident does not erase years of shared poverty or the cultural framework Victoria is operating within when she says we came from the same place. Those are two separate questions. The audit holds both. What the 2015 record does is establish that Victoria is not a neutral narrator. That does not mean everything she says is false. It means her claims require a higher evidentiary standard before they can be accepted at face value. And that is exactly the standard GloRilla's camp has been applying visibly and consistently since February 5th. The receipt deployment on February 9th and the mother's text message screenshots. Whether it was a deliberate strategic decision or an emotional response that happened to function like one, the structure was the same. GloRilla's camp waited for Victoria to establish her narrative publicly, then produced documentation that directly contradicted the most emotionally resonant claim, that the mother had been left behind. That sequencing matters. You do not post your mother's private text messages unless you have assessed that those messages will land harder than the narrative you are pushing back against. The public response suggested the assessment was correct. The messages spread widely, and GloRilla's camp was broadly perceived as having won the receipts exchange. One more piece of the record that requires honest handling. Victoria stated in her DJU-TV interview that her parents were paid approximately $9,000 to appear on the February 9th live stream and defend GloRilla. That is a serious claim. It is also a claim made by someone with a direct incentive to delegitimize the counter-narrative. There is no independent verification of that figure, no payment record, no confirmation from the parents, no statement from GloRilla's management. It is a single-source assertion from an interested party. We note it because it is on the record. We cannot confirm it. It does not move past that level without supporting documentation. In a forensic audit, a verbal claim about a payment without a corroborating document or independent witness remains exactly that, a claim. That applies to Victoria's $9,000 assertion the same way it applies to the $500,000 figure the siblings put forward. The evidentiary standard does not shift based on which side is making the claim. Now let's place the credibility question where it belongs, not as a verdict on Victoria as a person, but as a structural read on what the competing records produce. GloRilla's camp entered this dispute with one major institutional asset Victoria did not have, a document that predates the fame, predates the money dispute, and carries no fingerprints from either camp's current PR operation. The 2015 warrant was not created for this moment. It simply existed. When it resurfaced, it reframed 11 years of estrangement in a single news cycle, not as celebrity coldness, but as a documented safety boundary held consistently over time. Victoria entered this dispute with a story that was immediately emotionally compelling, a clear dollar ask that sounded reasonable relative to her sister's estimated earnings, and a platform, Facebook, that could sustain and monetize the attention the story generated. By February 10th, the institutional record had done more damage to Victoria's position than anything GloRilla said directly, and GloRilla had not said anything directly. That is the credibility dynamic the audit holds going into the stakeholder map, not who was right as a human being, who had the stronger receipts, and what kind of receipts they were. Let's map who was in this dispute, what they stood to gain, and what the mechanics of each move actually were. Because once you run the incentive math, several things that looked chaotic start to look deliberate. Full cast before we expand the frame. Victoria is the accuser. GloRilla is the brand at risk. The family is split into competing witnesses. Victoria isolated on one side, supporting siblings publicly aligned with GloRilla on the other. And then there are the outsiders, people who touched this dispute and walked away with something for doing it. Start with Victoria. By her own public admission, stated across multiple interviews, and she has an incentive to frame this number favorably, she generated significant income from this dispute. She cited figures ranging from $30,000 upward, with some assertions reaching considerably higher, from fan donations, merchandise activity, and booking inquiries that came in as a direct result of the viral attention. She said on record she was getting booked off the chaos. She told Finesse 2 times that if he was going to use her name to generate views, he owed her a cut, because she was eating off the attention too. That is not a slip, that is a disclosed business model. Victoria entered this dispute from a constrained position. Per her own statements, she is subject to GPS monitoring conditions related to prior legal matters, meaning her movement is legally restricted. She cannot chase the story physically, so she had to maximize it digitally. Her Facebook page, her primary monetization channel, has since been deactivated. She had limited financial leverage and no label infrastructure behind her. What she had was proximity to a famous sibling and a story that was immediately compelling to a large online audience. The move she made, TMZ first, then DJUTV, with live streams running in between, follows a recognizable pattern. Lead with the most emotionally resonant claim. Name a specific, modest-sounding dollar figure to make the ask seem reasonable. Detail the shared struggle to establish moral standing. Stay visible long enough for the algorithm to do the rest. The output was the same either way. Victoria converted a private family grievance into a revenue-generating public platform within roughly a week. Now map GloRilla's position. She is signed to a major label structure, Collective Music Group, distributed through Interscope. That means real brand standards, contractual stakes, and people whose job is to protect the commercial asset. Grammy nomination, active touring, and event schedule. A commercial trajectory that was, by any observable metric, ascending through early 2026. The risk profile of this dispute for GloRilla was not primarily emotional, it was commercial. The question her camp, and that includes label and management, not just GloRilla personally, had to answer was, how do you neutralize a high-velocity public claim from a family member without doing more brand damage through the response than through the original allegation? The answer they landed on: don't respond directly, deploy receipts, let aligned witnesses speak, maintain the professional schedule, use platform mechanisms rather than personal confrontation if escalation is required. The silence strategy reflects the constraint-setting function of label and management counsel operating in the background of every public move her camp made. It fits that pattern clearly, even if we cannot confirm the internal conversations that produced it. The job listings repost, sharing employment listings publicly during the peak of the dispute, was the one moment where GloRilla came closest to direct commentary. It was pointed, It landed as a message without being a statement. Plausible distance maintained. Subtext read clearly by the audience. That is brand protection first crisis management applied to a family dispute. The personal cost, the appearance of coldness, the refusal to engage emotionally in public is a real trade-off. But the commercial logic held. Now let's talk about Tory Lanez because his entry into this dispute is the most structurally interesting move in the entire sequence. Tory Lanez is currently incarcerated following a conviction related to a firearms incident involving Megan Thee Stallion. Megan Thee Stallion is a professional collaborator of GloRilla's. That relationship is on the public record. From inside a correctional facility, Tory Lanez sent Victoria Woods $2,500 via Apple Pay, the exact dollar amount Victoria had been publicly demanding from GloRilla. Victoria posted the receipt. She thanked him publicly. Let's run the incentive map on that payment. For Victoria, she received the money she said she needed. She posted proof. She framed it as validation. Someone came through when her own sister would not. The internet amplified the contrast immediately. For Tory Lanez, there are two plausible reads. The first, pure optics and attention, a low-cost way to stay visible from inside a facility at a moment when his public options are extremely limited. The second, Lanez's own legal history intersects with GloRilla's professional circle. Megan Thee Stallion is a documented collaborator of GloRilla's, a $2,500 gesture that makes GloRilla's silence look costly, requires nothing from him, and produces a visible contrast in a news cycle where his own public options are severely constrained. Whether that secondary incentive was active or incidental, the outcome it produced was real. We cannot verify intent. What we can measure is the outcome. Within hours, the dominant conversation had shifted from Victoria's claims about GloRilla to the fact that Tory Lanez paid what GloRilla would not. The narrative pivoted to the payment. Someone outside the dispute used $2,500 to insert themselves into the story at essentially no real cost. The money was not the point. The optics were. And GloRilla's camp did not respond to the Lanez payment publicly, which was, again, the correct brand call. Any direct response would have amplified it further. Now the secondary cast. Everyone who touched this dispute had something to gain, and the amounts were different. Finesse 2 times is the clearest example in this dispute of the cloud economy doing its work cleanly. The Memphis rapper, signed to Atlantic Records, reposted Victoria's TMZ clip and commented telling her to stop and go work. He then dropped video content expanding on that position, arguing that no one is owed anything based solely on family connection. His stated rationale, speaking from personal experience with having his own private matters aired publicly, that context is on the record, but his entry into the dispute also extended his own visibility during a high-traffic news cycle. Victoria's response to him, which was extensive and pointed, generated additional content and engagement for both of them. She said on record that everyone who used her name was generating attention she was also benefiting from. That assessment was accurate. Low-cost insertion into a high-traffic moment with measurable visibility return. That is the mechanic, stated plainly. Freddie Gibbs posted briefly on X, called it entertainment and disengaged. One sentence is the right amount of coverage for a one-sentence contribution. Boozy Badazz, as covered in the timeline, was brought in by Victoria's interpretation of his Breakfast Club comments. His de-escalation was rapid and genuinely non-combative. His stated position, speaking from personal family experience, not defending GloRilla, is consistent with the content of his Breakfast Club appearance as described in the available record. The diabetic twin exchange was the one moment of lightness in an otherwise grinding public dispute. Now, the platform layer, because Meta, the parent company of Facebook, was also a functional stakeholder in this dispute, whether it intended to be or not. Victoria's Facebook page generated significant engagement during the dispute's peak week. High-conflict content with an emotionally legible premise performs well algorithmically. The platform surfaced it. Ad revenue followed the traffic. Then, after mass reporting directed at the page, the platform's enforcement process resulted in deactivation. The honest framing of that sequence, high-conflict content often gets amplified by platforms right up until reporting volume triggers a policy review. Enforcement then arrives. The creator absorbs the loss. The platform maintains policy compliance on paper. That pattern could explain what happened here, but we cannot prove Meta's motive or confirm the specific mechanism of removal. What we can say is that the platform benefited from the traffic Victoria's dispute generated, and then the page came down after the reporting campaign. The sequence is documented. The institutional intent behind it is not. Victoria lost her channel. The dispute had already done its work for everyone else in the room. Let's close the audit. Here is where each party stands, what the record actually settled, and what the incentive logic predicts next. Start with what this dispute resolved, and what it did not. In the public sphere, GloRilla's camp achieved its primary objective, The neglect narrative Victoria introduced on February 5th was met with counter-documentation within 4 days. The mother's text messages, the siblings' on-camera testimony, and the reintroduction of the 2015 arrest warrant collectively shifted the dominant frame from GloRilla abandoned her family to GloRilla maintained distance from a specific family member with a documented history of threatening behavior while continuing to support the others. That is a meaningful shift, but the audit has to be precise about what actually moved the needle and what did not. The $500,000 figure remains participant testimony, no deed, no certified financial disclosure. What contradicted the zero support claim was the mother's own messages. That is the receipt that held. The FedEx timeline remains contested. The baseline claim Victoria entered with, total abandonment, zero support, did not survive the counter-receipt deployment intact. But the full picture GloRilla's camp presented has gaps of its own. For Victoria, the short-term financial outcome was positive by her own account, and she has an incentive to frame that number favorably. She cited figures from $30,000 upward, with some assertions reaching considerably higher from fan donations, merchandise activity, and booking inquiries generated by the viral attention. She converted proximity to fame into a revenue event. That part worked. The longer-term position is more complicated. Her primary Facebook distribution channel was deactivated. Her Jeep's monitoring conditions create ongoing legal exposure if the dispute escalates further. And the 2015 arrest warrant is now permanently reattached to her public profile in a way it was not before February 2026. Every future interview, every future claim she makes about this family will be filtered through that document by anyone paying attention. She acknowledged in her DJU TV interview that going to TMZ created an irreversible condition. She said, once you do that, there is no reset button. The bridge is not just burned, it is demolished. And she said she struck the match. That is an unusually clear-eyed self-assessment for someone still in the middle of the dispute when she said it. The record holds an open loop here. Victoria says it is over. She also says she wishes it never went public. Those two things are not a contradiction. They are what it looks like to be on the wrong side of a decision you made with clear eyes. The reconciliation question was asked directly in the DJU TV interview, and the answer is on record. Victoria was asked what it would take for her and GloRilla to be in the same room again. She said it was too far gone. She said they might as well stop calling themselves siblings at this point. And then, in the same interview, she said she wished it had not gone this way. She wished they could have sat down face to face, without cameras, without blogs, without the internet commentary, and worked it out directly. The record holds an open loop here. The shared origin story has not been erased. GloRilla's own interviews and music reference where she came from. Victoria's position is that the story is not enough without the relationship. The audit cannot resolve that. It is a question audiences answer for themselves. Victoria held her position in that interview. She said, blood is not thicker than water. She said, family does not get a pass for doing you wrong simply because of a shared name. And she made a structural observation that landed with a significant portion of the audience. The same people telling her to let it go were not, as far as she could see, directing that same energy toward GloRilla and asking her to reach back. That is a fair point about how accountability flows in public disputes. It tends to go toward whoever is making the most noise, which is almost always the person with less institutional power. Victoria was loud, GloRilla was quiet. The cultural pressure went where the volume was. Now let's run the next moves scenarios, not predictions. Mechanism logic based on observable incentive structures, applied in the same format across each party. Incentive, constraint, likely next action. For Victoria, the incentive is to rebuild distribution and extend the dispute's revenue window. The constraint is the deactivated Facebook page, the Jeep's monitoring conditions, and the 2015 record now permanently in her public profile. The likely next action is a pivot to secondary platforms, Instagram and TikTok primarily, to reconstruct the audience she lost. The underlying story she is sitting on has legs beyond this specific moment as a content framework. If she can convert the audience's attention into a sustainable platform rather than a single event revenue spike, the long-term position improves. If the legal constraints tighten or a new incident surfaces, the trajectory narrows significantly. For GloRilla, the incentive is to protect the commercial trajectory and return to business as usual. The constraint is the residual reputational question the job listings repost left open. For core fans, it reads as boundary setting, but for observers who came in sympathetic to Victoria's poverty narrative, It can read as distance from a shared origin story. That tension does not go away because the receipts won the February news cycle. The likely next action is continued professional schedule maintenance with no direct engagement on the family dispute. The silent strategy holds as long as no new escalation forces a response. For the parents, they are the least visible stakeholders in the public record, and almost certainly the ones absorbing the most private cost. Their workplace location was disclosed publicly. Their private communication with GloRilla became a public artifact. They appeared on a live stream that Victoria later claimed, without verifiable documentation, was financially incentivized. Whatever the financial reality of their situation, the process of this dispute being resolved in public extracted a real personal cost from people who did not initiate it. Here's what the record says, in summary. The claim that GloRilla provided zero financial support to her family is contradicted by on-record digital evidence and multiple witness accounts. None of that evidence has been independently verified at the level of property deeds or certified financial disclosures. But the mother's own messages are the receipt that held, and they do not align with total abandonment. The claim that GloRilla's distance from Victoria specifically is rooted in celebrity arrogance is contradicted by an official arrest warrant that provides a documented, prior serious basis for that estrangement, one that predates the fame and operates independently of the money question. The claim that Victoria is simply a wronged family member speaking truth is complicated, not invalidated, but complicated, by her own disclosed monetization of the dispute, the 2015 record, and the gap between her public framing and the counter-documentation her family produced. None of that means Victoria's pain is not real. The childhood she describes is on the public record. The poverty is verifiable in outline. The experience of watching a sibling exit that world while you remain in it is a real structural condition, not a manufactured grievance. The question the record cannot resolve is whether the person describing that pain is also the right narrator for it. Audiences will answer that for themselves, based on which receipts they weight most heavily. What the record can say, this dispute did not happen because GloRilla became famous and forgot where she came from. It happened because two people from the same origin point carry a 2015 incident between them that permanently altered what trust was possible, and because the attention economy created conditions where the financial value of airing that privately held wound in public exceeded, at least in the short term, the cost of keeping it contained. The bridge, as Victoria said, is demolished. The record shows both of them were holding something when it came down. 3 things you now own from this audit. First, the receipts hierarchy. Not all receipts are equal. An institutional record, a warrant, a court filing, sits above participant testimony, which sits above a single interested party's assertion. When competing receipts collide, the question is not who posted first. It is what kind of document each receipt actually is. Second, the silence is strategy read. When a party with institutional backing, label, management, legal counsel, chooses not to engage a public claim directly, that is not absence. It is a calculated posture. The frame gets controlled by whoever stays on their schedule, while the other side generates volume. Silence only fails when new escalation forces a response the camp is not prepared for. Third, the clout economy entry cost. The same mechanic appears in any dispute where an external party enters with a gesture sized exactly to the public ask. The dollar amount signals the message. The message is the point. The $2,500 Tory Lanez payment is the clearest example in this record, not because of what it cost him, but because of what it bought. If this dispute follows the pattern the incentive logic predicts, Victoria rebuilds on secondary platforms and converts the story into ongoing content. GloRilla's camp maintains professional distance with no direct re-engagement unless forced, and the 2015 record remains the permanent filter through which every future public claim Victoria makes about this family will be read. The forensic work is done. The personal work, if it ever happens, happens off camera. That is where the record leaves it.